And in the humanity, this kind of stooping down, coming to be with among us as a way of, look, well, let me show you how to do it. Like, let me show you how to live. So kind of not only countercultural, but almost counterintuitive. But there's something that just I'm so drawn to with that. Like, that's a God I want that I didn't know I wanted, There's just something really beautiful about that, of a God coming in skin and saying, let me show you how it works. And it's not all tidy at all, and it's quite ugly. And but I'm going to feel all the feels, like I'm going there with you.
Welcome back to the Follower Podcast, everybody. If you're new here, my name is Matthew Lewis, and you have joined us at a very exciting time. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been in this series called Human, which is based on my very first book. And if you're listening to this, what that means is that book is now available in the world. Which is so exciting and also incredibly nerve-wracking and also just wonderful. I hope that this series has been helpful for you. I hope you've enjoyed the conversations. And more than that, I really do hope that it's kind of piqued your interest and created a bit of an appetite for you to go check out the book. You can visit www.mattlewis.co.za, and there you'll find two links, one for South Africans, where they'll be able to order from a local distributor, and one for people in other nations, where you'll get a link to Amazon and be able to get your book there. All that to say, the series has been great as we've looked at our longings for truth and goodness and beauty. And now we end off this series with a final conversation on the humanity of Jesus with my friend Nathan Foster. And so, with all the excitement in the world, let's jump right into that conversation. Nathan, thank you. So grateful that you were able to join us.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Matthew.
And Nathan has been on the podcast before, so you can go have a search and have a listen to the conversation we've had before. But he's just coming back a second time, and I would love to think that we have a sort of growing friendship over a distance. And he was just saying that he might come to South Africa next year, so hopefully we'll get a coffee. But Nathan, let's jump right into it. We're talking about the humanity of Jesus. What are some of the first things that kind of stir up inside of you around this idea of the humanity of Jesus?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Matthew. I like where you're going with this. I like this as a doorway, exploring what it means to be human and our longings that most likely, or it's at least a rational conclusion, that these longings were flirting with echoes from another world. That we all have these basic things that unite us, and it's just a good. So maybe the first thing that comes to mind for me is just, what does it mean to be human? And I don't really have an answer for that, but it's a question I want to hold. And why on earth would God choose the Jesus way, embodied in flesh, as a way to connect, to redeem humanity? Like, I think I'm baffled by that. Why would God do that and not just, find some other easier, softer way? Or to me, it's just baffling that and echoes of something true to me. Because I never would have thought of that if I made a bunch of ants. And I want them to learn how to be good ants, function as they should. And I want good for them, that I go become an ant. It just wouldn't, there's something kind of maddening about it, which makes it smell true to me, or at least worth exploring. I have a friend who, she's not a Christian and doesn't want much to do with God. But one day she sent me a text, and she was referencing the verse in John that Jesus wept. And she said, if there's anything that would make me believe, it's this. That at least the way this text is being written, it's showing the humanity and as I've spent time with that verse, it's actually one of my favorite verses, because it echoes that he felt something, he understood something, and that's the story of Lazarus, where his friend died, and he goes on to raise him from the dead, and you think, well, he must have known he was going to do that, and I've heard some people interpret that verse as, he wept because people didn't believe or their lack of faith. And I don't think that's it. I think he genuinely felt the loss of a friend and understood the kind of humanity of grief that we feel. And then, and the fact that it's just one sentence, just one verse, these two words, Jesus wept. He just stopped and wept. There's something really compelling to me about that. Yeah. It's good. It's a good question, Matthew. Good topic.
Yeah. I like that. And I think what you're leaning into is some of what I feel. So even if we take the word God, right? That word is a box for a bunch of ideas. Mm-hmm. And so we have a whole bunch of ideas we put into that box. And depending on the ideas in the box depends on whether or not we're open to the box itself, right? And there are typical kinds of words that go in the box, in the God box. Typical kinds of ideas or typical kinds of thoughts that are almost expected when you're talking about the idea of God. And Jesus comes... And if Jesus is the revelation of God, so when Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, or we read in the scriptures that in the face of Christ is the glory of God. He is, I write in the book, there's this little line I use that I say that Jesus is the anti-God. Anti-God with a little g, because he's the only God who seems so uninterested in being God. He's almost got like an indifference to all the pomp and ceremony that we kind of wrap around our conceptions of what God is supposed to be. And then there's that phrase in the book where I say, while all the other gods are walking on some celestial red carpet, Jesus is dumpster diving, to find those who are on the margins. And I think for me, that's what's striking and stirring about the humanity of Jesus is similarly to how you've described it. It's so unexpected in the realm of a conversation about God. I don't know. Does that resonate with you?
It does. I'm thinking of that. If you truly are God, you don't need to prove that you're God. That almost the kind of flexing of a kind of God image of, bow before me, thunder and fire is an insecure God.
Right.
But if you truly are, you don't need to prove it. And then the wonderful twist that you're alluding to is it turns everything upside down. It's that I care about things you don't care about. I care about broken people. I care about real life. And I'm not impressed with your fancy prayers and your gold statues and your, religious nonsense. I want your heart. I care about you. I love that. That's just so kind of not only countercultural, but almost counterintuitive. But there's something that just I'm so drawn to with that. Like, that's a God I want that I didn't know I wanted,
Yeah.
And in the humanity, this kind of stooping down, coming to be with among us as a way of, look, well, let me show you how to do it. Like, let me show you how to live. And in one sense, I think that's one of the most compelling pieces for Christianity, is learning how to live a good life. And that learning to forgive our enemies, love our enemies, and to love others actually is a very practical way to have a good life. And there's just something really beautiful about that, of God coming in skin and saying, let me show you how it works. And it's not all tidy at all. And it's quite ugly. And, but I'm going to feel all the feels like I'm going there with you. Just love that. It makes me want to hang out with them.
Totally. I completely get that. Yeah. That he was tempted in every way that we are tempted, yet without sin. That he, there's never been a moment in my life where I've gone through something that God, through the humanity of Jesus, is unable to relate to. Not in a conceptual way, not in like, oh, I know that because I am God, but in an experiential way, very viscerally. Jesus has known grief. Jesus has known loss. And so the God that I worship, and this is where the God of the Christian story, the one we find in Jesus, is so differentiated from almost like literally every other God narrative, right? Is that this God is not, he's not somewhere up in the clouds where we have to, climb a holy hill to get there. No, he's come and embodied the human experience. And when I'm worshiping that God can so profoundly relate to me because that God has lived in my experience,
Yeah, that's right. That's quite beautiful. And the idea of, if you think of, it's a loaded word that I hate to even just throw out because it needs unpacking. But if you think of sin, and sin is a dysfunction that makes our life not work. That it's just a way of distorting what it means to be human. That living a life of self-obsession and having to have my own way, or vengefulness, or pride. That these are just distortions of what it means to be human. And then Jesus saying, "Look, I got a better way. You don't need to kick your own teeth in." Like here's and I know what it means. I know what it feels like to have my friends betray me, to have people that I'm trying to be kind to conspire against me. Fear, grief. You're right, Matthew. It's all in there. Like I've yet to encounter an experience that I can't find some connection to in these short gospels. We don't hear much. It's very small, but in terms of volume of his life, but it's all in there. It's all there. And then there's a lean into, right? That whether it's a temptation or a pain, there's a friend, a companion, that we ultimately learn that we're not alone. It's that human experience, that loneliness, that in the end we'll die alone. It's a journey we have to take alone, and thus is life. Although I'm all about community and friends, and I think that's so important, family. But in the end, there is a sort of aloneness that we're each left with in the middle of the night when the pain is there, the grief is there, and to go, I have a friend that's distant, not as close as I'd like. I sure would like it if it was closer, but I'm trusting that there's a goodness in even that distance. But it's something to lean into. It's something to press into, that I get to discover that I'm really not alone. There's an ache. There's a longing for more, but I don't have to be alone.
Lessons on Learning to Breathe, a reading from the book. When did we strip the sacred from the kitchen sink and peel glory off the bathroom walls like fading paint? Why have we tried to box up heaven and lock it tight under the shadow of a steeple, singing songs to the God of the professionals who grants the desperate an audience each Sunday before sending them back to their lives? Not that there's anything wrong with Sundays, steeples, or songs. They're as good a place as any to meet God. But so are gardens, office blocks, and checkout queues at grocery stores that rival the Great Wall of China in their torturous length? Are we hung up on stories of a distant creator? Is God as still as a statue in our imagination, waiting immovable behind rituals and offerings that break the backs of those who drag them uphill to some temple? Let me be clear. Jesus utterly obliterates these paradigms. Whatever space he left to tread the dirt of earth is surely the home of the anti-God. A God so utterly uninterested in being God that he drained himself empty of deity, embraced the form of flesh, and walked our world as a servant. The God whose final exhalation ripped wide a temple curtain, one we seem intent on repairing, to shatter a box holding heaven and pour it out into the streets. The God who comes to us as human. And even you know, when you talk about companionship, how true intimacy, which is, it's wild that that's what we can expect in our friendship with God.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, because again, we operate within so many assumptions that are really quite unique to the Christian worldview. Like in so many other God stories, there isn't the expectation of intimacy with God, and yet we just throw that around as if that's commonplace. You know, it's quite unique to the God story of Jesus. But intimacy, like real intimacy, is about mutual self-disclosure.
There you go.
So there's a mutuality, and it's not just about me sharing my loneliness with God. It is God sharing God's loneliness with me, right? Through the person of Jesus. And so I often think, for me, in terms of the humanity of Jesus and how that becomes fertile ground for a deeper sense of intimacy with God, is like often I'll ask God to accompany me in my suffering, my loneliness, my pain. And that's so beautiful and true. And God says yes and amen to that. But when I look at the Garden of Gethsemane, he gathers his 3 closest friends and then says, will you come accompany me? Will you come be with me in my suffering, in my hour of need, because I'm human, and because I'm lonely, and because this is scary, and because I need my friends to come and watch and pray with me. And and I think this is where Paul starts tapping in, where he says that we have we participate with Christ in his sufferings. You know, we fellowship with him in his sufferings. And it's not an ascetic. We're not running around trying to pursue suffering, but it is saying that, yes, we pray, God, would you accompany me in my pain? But I think Jesus says, yes, and would you accompany me in mine? And that's a kind of unique mutual self-disclosure that happens through the mechanism of the humanity of Jesus, right?
That's good. There's a lot in there. Yeah. The mutual self-disclosure, that the more we reveal, the more is revealed, and learning to suffer with Jesus for the things that Jesus suffers for, which is about people and about the brokenness and the heartache and the isolation and and learning to long for good for others in that, accompanying the pain. It's interesting. I really like where you're going of let's just step back. It's tricky because so much of Christianity has been, at least here in the States, culturally distorted, and Christians don't look very Christ-like. God bless them. And it can be a dominant narrative. But if we step back and just look at all the kind of different religious options, it is truly unique. Of I want intimacy with you. Like I want, I mean, even, a lot of the biblical literature is quite erotic, and I want the bridegroom. Like I want to be one with you. But what I love about it is that it requires more of me than religious devotion. Right. In one sense, asking me to do these rituals or, just do these behaviors and not these ones. And just like, in one sense, that's, relationship with a parent or a boss but to say, no, I want your heart, and I want deeper. Like in that's a vulnerability on our part, which is just, it's beautiful. I'm reminded of a statement that our friend Dallas Willard used to say, where people would ask him, "Why do you follow Jesus?" And his response was, "Who do you suggest I follow?" like what are the other options here? Because there's something really good about this, and if you got a better option, this is my language. If you have a better option, I'll listen. Like I'm not, I want to, but boy, there's nothing on the kind of religious, platter that even begins to. And let me just riff for a minute here. The other compelling piece to me is the humility. Yeah. You alluded to that a little as the anti-God. If you look historically, the kind of Roman and Greek thought and virtue ethics, humility was not there. Like it was. I think it's safe to say in a kind of, you probably would find this. No, you do find this in indigenous communities, but at least in kind of mainstream Western thought, Jesus just blew the system open with prizing humility and prizing not puffing oneself up. And again, it's just one of these backwards things that just smells right to me.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I love that. There's that passage in Philippians where it says, being in very nature God, he empties himself of his divinity, right? And depending on how you translate that, there's different ways of doing that. But one of my favorite readings or takes on that is that Jesus shows us the kind of God who empties himself. That's so Jesus didn't set aside his godness in setting aside his divinity. That definitively was an expression of the kind of godness that this God is. This is the kind of God who empties himself. So he
put his money where his mouth was.
Do you know what I mean? He didn't
suspend
his nature quickly to empty himself. If anything, the emptying, that the incarnation was the amplifying of maybe the purest form of the state of this God. And that's very powerful for me.
Yeah, it's like I'm not just saying it. They say this with writing, like show, don't tell. It's like he showed. Here's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And then it completely transformed the world. It's a good story. I love it.
It's the best. I wonder if there's anything offensive you find about the humanity of Jesus. Anything that's hard to swallow. There's this line in the book I write, which I laughed when I wrote it, but the more I think about it, I think it's so true, is that even when we are willing to acknowledge, okay, Jesus was human, we still put boundaries on that, right? Because we like our gods dressed up in decorum, but Jesus comes dripping in placenta.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good line.
Like even in ourselves, there's something offensive about how human Jesus has become. I wonder, stir anything in you?
Yeah, it is. There is a sort of, we like a strong man, or like and in reading through the crucifixion and him not defending himself, he's clearly innocent, and just choosing not to, and sometimes in a reading of that, it's like, why did you do that? Why didn't you, there's almost a kind of, you let yourself be humiliated publicly. Could you imagine, like publicly dying and being mocked? And I don't know. I assume he was naked on the cross and in front of his mom and his friends and loved ones, and not and then the kind of forgive them. Yeah, it's unsettling, but man, what an invitation to lean into the mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is a kind of, in our simplicity of wanting our God box to be simple and clear, and the kind of archetype of a God that asks us to do this and that, and it's very clear. But to ask for our heart and to ask for relationship with, there's something nebulous about that, which is part of what I like about it, is you just get to go deeper and deeper. But in our humanness, to kind of check things off in a God that's neat and tidy, there's appeal to that. Man, it is quite scandalous, and it does mess with us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think I love this idea you're introducing around some of the mystery, the unavoidable mystery in the place of relationship. And I think because some of our conceptions of God, apart from a God that comes to us as human, can be, like you say, very two-dimensional and very clean. And then it's easier for us to hold that God at a distance. So that God can remain in the place of concept, and that God can remain convenient, and we can feel like we're having religious observance, but we're not entering into the complexity of real relationship. And then the humanity of Jesus almost forces the issue a little bit, because the humanity of Jesus muddies the waters to such a degree that you can't see clearly from a distance. You now have to get up close and into the realm of experience in order to make any sense of it at all. I don't know. That just was interesting to me.
And one of my favorite terms for God is mystery, the great mystery, and just befriending that. I don't really understand all this. It's fascinating to me, and I think I wish that we highlighted it more, but Jesus was quite, he never had a harsh word for the bruised and broken. But the proud, the religious, he just trashed the religious establishment of his day to the point that it got him killed.
Yeah.
And to just kind of hold that the kind of normal way of doing things, he just kind of busts in there and says, no, that's not the way. I said it just a minute ago, but it really is maybe one of the most compelling pieces for me, is the mystery and the deeper intimacy and the deeper vulnerability. And that in that, the great irony is we learn who we really are. We get to be our true selves, the unique person that God created us to be, and that you just go deeper and deeper. I get bored with stuff quite easily, but I've been at this following Jesus thing for quite a while, and I'm nowhere near bored. This goes deeper and deeper, and then I would say on into eternity, that we're eternal beings, that we get to grow in the mutual self-revelation, as you said, with the Trinity. I love that.
So good. What a thing to look forward to, hey?
Yeah. And to get to live into our uniqueness. I think we talked earlier about creativity, and that God uniquely knit us together to be, and those things that we really like about ourselves, the things God likes too, and celebrates and says, yes, let me show you how I made you and who I made you to be. I don't know of any other religion that would offer that, a kind of movement into your true self. And that you don't have to puff yourself up either. And that's about freedom, right? Like, how many of us are in bondage to pleasing others or trying to be someone we're not? That's a hard life. But to just simply be like Jesus was, not trying to prove anything, but just being.
The Mystery and the Builder, a reading from the book. There is more mystery than clarity packed into the place I call my faith. My tight grip has slipped over the years and stretched thin in the tension of living. Once firm convictions have gently moved aside in a necessary shedding of baggage on the narrowing pathway home. But while some things fade into obscurity in all the cosmic decluttering, others resolve into sharp focus with each decrease in the decibels of noise. They set, firm as concrete, and anchor those floating mists of mystery to the immovable earth of truth. It's a wonderful paradox of being. One of those things is Jesus. He's not the man I first met so many years ago. He's undressed from all the preferences and perceptions I used to try and turn him into me. But surprisingly, considering the poor company I have been, he is still here. With each passing day of our friendship, he seems to take up more space in the living room of my soul. He's not anxious there, but he is active. Moving around those creaky floorboards and tidying up the place, he packs coffee cups away to make room on the dining room table. I'm glad he let me keep it. Not all the things that used to fill this space survived his eye for detail. There's a graveyard in the back garden filled with trinkets and trophies that didn't fit the aesthetic of the world he is building here. He looks at me with a spark in his eye that I've come to recognize as the beginnings of trouble. He has a flair for the dramatic, this Jesus. He pulls a fresh set of blueprints from his bag and rolls them out on the varnished wood where they slap open in their unveiling. My eyes scan the dark lines that build shapes all over the paper. It's a daunting proposition for sure. Much of it will be painful, but gulping down a cocktail of anxiety and gratitude, I take a deep breath and prepare for the rebuilding. While I was ready to make a little cabin out of me, he seems set on a palace. I think that's a good segue into some of my thought around how helpful the humanity of Jesus can be as a starting point for people who are curious about him but resistant to religion. Mm-hmm. And how very often that's a really healthy and really helpful starting point to just go, okay, well, let's consider some of the things that you long for. Let's consider, you're not into God, you don't want to come to church, you're not about religion. I get that, that's okay. But you long for beauty.
Yes.
You long for truth. Yes. I know that in you because we've had that conversation. You're longing for goodness. You know, where do you think those things find their home? And what if we explored this person, Jesus, just in his humanity? And I know I recognize there's a tension to be managed here because, again, one of the things I write in the book is we know that Jesus is more than human. Yes. Because we know there are still echoes bouncing off the walls of an empty cave just outside Jerusalem. So he is more than human, but sometimes wisdom builds a bridge before it tries to break a boundary. And so we want to get into the divinity of Jesus, which is in so many ways unique to him. So we're not saying that we ourselves are God, but we are saying that as a meeting point, Jesus meets us in the common experience of humanity, and that might be a really helpful meeting point for some people. Thoughts on that?
Well, it's just good stuff in there. I like that. I think I want to go back just a little bit in your reference to people who are resistant to religion. It was really helpful to me to have that affirmed, that our resistance to religion may just be a God-inspired insight. It may just be good, Be resistant to the distortions is the way I would say it. I had someone ask me, this is kind of a fun conversation. Why do you follow Jesus? Why is this? Why do you believe in God? Why do you, just kind of real honest seeking. And I ultimately came back to beauty and goodness. I can't shake it. It's there. And I can't, I can't science that one out.
Yeah.
You know, and sure, maybe the flower and the exchange between a child or a loving embrace of a parent. I mean, maybe this is just chemicals. You know, I just can't be settled with that. It's too compelling, and there's in the end, it is beauty and goodness, and it's those longings that draw me to say there's got to be something more. Right? We all, like, why do we do that? Why is it baked into us as humans to say, no, things need to be right. We want perfection. We want good. We want justice. We all do that. Why is that just, well, I think we're made for another world.
Yeah.
We're not made for this world, and that's getting home. That's coming home to ourselves. That's coming home to being, you know, relationship with God is a longing and a celebration of beauty and goodness and truth, in all its forms. It just smells right. It just rings true. That's always where I go. That's what I said to my friend. I just can't shake it. I just can't let it go, and I don't. So maybe I'm wrong. I don't need to be right. Like, I'm sure I'm wrong about stuff, but boy, here the life of Jesus is a pathway deeper into this. Like, I want in. Like, I just keep showing up for that. What else should I do? Like, what? Like, puff up myself or pursue wealth or accomplishments, or I don't know, watch TV and numb out. Like, what? How else should I live life? Wow.
Yeah, so good. And those longings, I think, are not only, we don't only long to experience those things in the life to come, but we long to be those things.
Yes.
So when you said, like, what is human, I think that's one of the crux issues, is that we're really confused about that. But the scriptures aren't really. And I think it was Søren Kierkegaard. He spoke a lot about this, around how we've misunderstood this idea of our humanity, and somehow we've placed it in an inferior category. So you'll have that saying, like, we'll mess up, or we'll kind of live into the false version of ourselves, and then we'll say, like, I'm only human, as if being human is somehow a reason for our brokenness, rather than an invitation to our wholeness. And actually, in our brokenness, we're less than human in some ways, because the fullness of our humanity is actually, that's what Jesus comes to show us. He comes to say, well, this is a human. So if you're wondering, what does it mean to be human? Well, Genesis Imago Dei, we're meant to reflect the glory of God and be stewards in the earth, and we've got governmental responsibility to rule and reign. There's so much there. And then Jesus comes to give us a picture of that. So he's not only mediator of our whole selves, he's model. He's both and. He's not only mediated the healing of our humanity, he's the model of what that looks like in action. And so his way is the pathway to the fullness of who we're called to be as human beings. And that's why I think longings are such helpful pathways, because they lead us almost to a tension point where we long to be what we were made to be, but we recognize we can't get there alone. And so we need a guide,
Yeah.
And then Jesus comes and says, yeah, I've been human. I am human. I know how this human things works. I can show you the way if you'll follow me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And then hanging around people who seem to catch some of that,
Yeah.
There's a hope. There's a beauty. It baffles me here in the States at what people accept from their leaders in terms of character and treatment of others.
Yeah.
And it tells me that we don't have models for how to live a good life, and that being human. Yeah, I love what you're saying. That Well, it goes back to original blessing. We often talk of original sin or original curse, but that God designed humans to glorious beings, you know. We're not just animals, that there's something, and we have this capacity for great good and great destruction, you know. And then we get to choose. Who do you want to be? You want to destroy things or you want to build things, you know? You want to hate or you want to love? And then I say, well, I want to love. And then we run into ourselves where, well, I need some help. I can't do it on my own. Yeah. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's a good posture to go, I'm learning and I'm open. Teach me.
Yeah. Yes.
Teach me. Yeah. And if I can surround myself with people who a little further along than I am, you know, stuff rubs off on us.
So good. Yeah. So good, What a wonderful conversation, Nathan. As we kind of come to an end, I'm wondering, is there anything still stirring in you that you feel you want to say?
No, I'm just encouraged. I like the story, you know?
Yeah.
I like it. I don't think a human could have written it.
Yeah.
I just, you know, I mean, humans, we do amazing things, and I'm a fan of great literature, but to come up with such a backwardsy thing that just is so beautiful. I love it. Yeah, so I'm encouraged, man. Thanks. Always great to talk to you, Matthew. You got some good stuff here. And congrats on the book. It sounds quite wonderful.
Man. Yeah, thank you.
I like the poetic spoken wordiness to it. That's cool.
Yeah. And so there we are, friends. The end of our journey through the themes of human. As I've said before, the book is now available, www.mattlews.co.za, mattlewis.co.za, with 2 links, one link for a local distributor in South Africa and one link for people in other countries to the Amazon space. I don't really know what else to say other than enjoy the book if you're going to get one. I would love to hear from you. If you're reading this and these things are stirring you and helping you, then please be in touch. Email me through the site or get hold of me on Instagram and the like. I'd love to interact with you and see what's unfolding. And then I'd love to, in the coming months, do some living room sessions where I go around to people's houses, we do some readings and just have discussions about what these things are doing in our hearts. So if that's something that you'd be interested in hosting, please get hold of me. I'd love to hear from you about that as well. That's all we have left with the Human series. I thought I'd end off with one more reading from the end of the book. So I hope that you enjoy this, and thanks for listening in. Follow me. There are many answers to our question of what it means to be human. Every person with a podcast, and there are more of those than necessary, is slinging speech to preach their opinion on the subject. I'm one of them, I guess. So let me say this. In all the mingled ambiguity of heartbreaks and hallelujahs that living has served me, I have found neither companion nor master as proficient in the lost art of being human as Jesus. The first of us fumbled the fullness of our image in the garden all those lifetimes ago. It shattered, and we shattered with it. 1 billion shards flung like fading stars into every corner of creation. Jesus, the hopeless restorer that he is, pulled every piece back together in the pattern of his life and invited us to follow him. I don't know where we go from here. Probably back to that cliff and the inevitable trust fall that awaits us all in the new light of each morning. I just hope that even there, where firmament falls into faith, where paper walls flicker with flame and hurricanes rage and dishes lie stacked in lukewarm water, and we laugh and cry and choose to leave our lies behind and listen deeply to our longing souls, I hope that even there, we would hear his whispered invitation to follow him home and whisper a few words of our own. I'm coming.